guys, it's Kate and I hope you're having a great day. I am going to be doing a fluid watercolor painting today and I'm working with these. This is the acrylic ink, but the rest of these are watercolor inks. So these are the colors and products I'm working with, and so I'm going to put these aside and get started. Just so you know that Daler Rowney Aquafine watercolor ink is the gold color. It's the shimmery, beautiful color that we're going to use to add some sparkle to our painting. So first I'm going to spray my paper and get it nice and wet. And I'm going to work pretty wet today on this background. I'm just kind of using my brush to loosely spread around this water, and then I'm going to be working light to dark, and I'm going to be adding some of that acrylic over the top. So I'm going to start with the green and add just some fun little dots here. And we can always add more, but I'm just going to start small. And then I'm going to go into the pink. And this is just a wonderful color here. I love it. And I'm going to do a lot more with the pink. And this is going to be kind of the star of the show. I'm going to let that kind of fade together and move around a bit. And then I'm going to add this sepia. And this is very dark. And it's a strong color. So I'm going to add it to some of these white areas. And just let it kind of flow together. I'm going to pick this up and swirl it around just a little bit. I've got some excess water kind of sinking to the center. So what I'm going to do is grab a paper towel and just mop up some of that excess, and it's going to kind of flow together to fill in the blank space. If it doesn't, you can always use your brush and just kind of close that gap again if you want. You can also blend or blot to add texture. So if you wanted to use paper towel, I'm just going to put this back together again. If you wanted to add some textures, you could, just like that, and kind of blend the colors that way. If you kind of have it the way you like it, which I really sort of like that random pattern. I'm going to grab some more paper towel because that one is pretty saturated with water. And I'm just going to go back into this center area, lighten it up a little bit, and just take out some more of that excess water. And I'm going to add some more to that outside. I'm going to grab this light blue. This is acrylic ink, and so it's going to have an interesting effect with the watercolor that's on here. It's kind of like pushing it aside, and it kind of sits a little bit differently than the watercolor ink. It does spread out a little bit, but it seems it's kind of a bit heavier. And so it pushes the watercolor ink aside and kind of sits where you lay it. And it adds some really interesting effects. And you can kind of see that. It spreads out a lot in water too, but it has just a really neat look with watercolor. So I'm going to go back into the watercolor ink into this gold. And I'm going to put this in a couple of spots here. I'm just kind of using my dropper to spread this around, and this will spread out a bit. And sometimes it's kind of surprising the way it spreads. So I'm going to leave that the way it is. And I might actually go into my white also. I'm going to blot up a little bit of this sepia that's kind of sitting there in a puddle. And now I don't want it to be too wet. And I'm going to come back in with this white. And you can see that kind of spreading out with the paint also. I'm going to come right down through here and just add some of these little tendrils and really get that brightness going in the center. This looks really cool. All right, I have a lot of paint and a lot of fluid on here, so I am going to set this aside and let it dry. Since we are working very fluid, we are going to have a lot of interest, and it's going to look a lot different when we come back to it. See, if I drop this watercolor in, it kind of goes right underneath that acrylic ink. But it'll kind of mix with it a bit, which maybe I want to do actually. I kind of like that effect. And it mixes with that turquoise too. But we get an interesting look here. I think I like that. That's pretty. And we kind of get a little bit of that green going on out here. Maybe I will play with this a little bit more. You never know what's going to happen. I'm kind of toning down a little bit of this green. It's very bright out of the bottle. But I kind of like the little hints of it here and there, kind of mixing with the white. Okay, I'm going to leave this alone before I get kind of a muddy mess. I can always add more later, so I don't want to overdo it. I'm going to let this dry and we will be back. So I love how this one turned out. It's all dry and you can see that shimmer from the gold. We've got plenty of brightness in here. And once again, I am seeing flowers. I see a flower here and I see kind of a flower with some petals here. And this is where I was kind of blotting at the paint and the ink and kind of just messing with it to get the excess water up, and it actually turned into a really neat texture. So I'm going to embrace those two and try to pick out another couple. We've got some nice greenery kind of coming out here, so we have a lot to work with this one. I went ahead and grabbed my brush pen, and I am going to start, I think, with this center flower. So I kind of see 3 petals, so I'm just going to go with it. And I'm going to start, and I'm going to have kind of a variable line here. And do it fine and thick at the same time. Or in the same shape, I should say. And then I'm going to come down here and join that up. And I'm turning this around so that it's easier for me to work with. But whatever works for you, you should definitely do. So we've got 3 petals here. And then I've got some little sort of center shapes here, almost like the flower is sort of facing in that direction and kind of laying down. So I'm going to kind of embrace that. And then I'm going to add some darker marks here in the center. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill these in. And maybe add a couple more. Just like that. And then I think we've got kind of a fun little leaf shape coming down over here. So I'm going to put this in. Just like that. And then I'm going to add this other leaf shape over here. And then maybe a second one coming from behind it. And then I've got this kind of fun flower shape here. I'm going to use my brush pen and just add some fun little hash marks around the outside, kind of fine. To sort of highlight that shape. And then I'm going to go around, and actually I'm going to have this one kind of coming in front of it. And there's a third flower for us. And then this one, I'm going to have come right out like this. And then I'll add some little hash marks to the center of this one too. And then I'm trying to pick out any other fun little shapes here. I think I'm going to turn this little purple shape into a fourth petal, and then have a fifth petal kind of coming back there. I really didn't like having 3. It just looked kind of funny to me. I think it looks better with 4. And then I am going to kind of make some kind of mark here. I think I see sort of a natural greenery shape kind of coming through here. And then maybe another leaf shape joining this little stem and then kind of disappearing behind this flower. And I'm just picking out my shapes before I do more patterns and stuff. So I've got that. Since that's a leaf, I can do some blue leaves, at least giving myself permission. So I'm going to outline this one here, and we're kind of building up our little composition. I want to leave this gold here and this brown, and then I think for the rest we can do some different things. So I'm going to start with that, and I'm going to put my brush pen away, and I'm going to start making some patterns. Okay, so I was looking at some different layouts, and I think I like this layout the best, with everything kind of pointing up instead of laying down. And this just looks a little bit more natural to me, and you have some nice empty space over here. So one of the first things I want to do is grab my fuchsia Posca marker and bring some of this brightness that we have toward the outside borders back into our focal area. And this isn't exactly the same color, but it's going to be, I think, a really nice addition. So I'm going to kind of follow along the outside of this black, or the inside of the black border rather, and add some color along my petals. And so I'm going to just kind of work my way around and add some real nice highlights here. And I'm kind of making it thicker toward the outside of the petal, like this, and then have it sort of taper off as we reach close to the inside of the petal. And I'm trying to stay inside of the black outline, so we still have that sort of as a border, and we can still see all that wonderful texture from the dry paint. And I think this is going to be a nice addition of brightness to our flower here. I'm going to have this one come in a little bit more, maybe this one also. Yeah, I think that looks nice. I'm going to do the same thing down here, but in a different way. So I think maybe for this one, I'm going to have the ruffled edge go all the way around each petal here. And I'm just sort of making that squiggly round shape, and then I'm going to fill it in. Okay, so for this larger one, I'm going to do a dot pattern very close together toward the center where we have our insides, and it's going to be really compact down in here. And I'll even put some of it over that black. So as we kind of come out, I'm going to make our dots farther apart, just like that. And just kind of work at it until it gets to be where I like it. So I'm just going to make it really heavy, so it kind of acts like its own shading without covering up everything that we have going on with that wonderful paint. Now for this one, I'm going to add dots too, but I'm going to add them to the center here. And maybe some of them will be a little bit larger. So we have a little bit of variation in our pattern here. So everything is not just exactly the same. And I think that looks pretty cool. I'm going to grab my pink Posca marker, and I'm going to add a little dot border inside the dark pink around these flower petals. And then I think I'm also going to add some stripes to the petals themselves, coming in toward the center. And we have a good bit of contrast there, and I might add some finer lines that are a little bit more wavy on this one, and I'm kind of following the direction of the outside curve of the petal. So we've got our brightness back, which is awesome. I'm going to grab my white jelly roll, and I'm going to add a little white outline to these petals. And I'm not going to do too clean of a mark because my pen only wants to half work for me anyway. So I am just going to not really worry about that and make the marks where I can, but just kind of follow the outside of these petals to add some more contrast to the background. Now I think I'm ready to grab one of my finer tips. I'm going to grab this 03 tip, which is a little bit narrower, and I'm going to start adding some texture to this greenery. So I'm going to do some very simple stripes. And I'm going to add them to the inside of this stem to give it some more contrast from the background. And then I'm going to start working on these leaves. And I'm just going to kind of do this simple scallop pattern here, very scribbly. I don't want to cover up this wonderful gold that we have here, so I'm going to try to keep that. I'm going to add a couple of extra little scallops here to make it reach the edge. I'm going to do that same thing to all of these leaves. I'm going to make sure that this center line is a little bit darker. So I'm going to go over it a couple more times, just like that. So it's got kind of a little bit of shading here. And then I'm going to have this leaf, I'm going to have the middle of it be right about here. So I'm going to add these loops and then come into this one over here. I really like this so far. It's pretty fun looking. All right, I think I'm ready. I'm ready to grab my brown. Now this brown I think is going to show up a little bit lighter than our burnt sienna, but I am going to do just a couple of little test marks. I'm going to do a few little sort of dashed mark patterns just for a little kind of subtleness to the outside so we can get some marks, and I'm just going to stay inside the parts where we have burnt sienna. And I'm just going to add a very simple dashed mark pattern here, kind of going in the same direction. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. Then I'm going to take my light pink and I'm going to do some stripes, I think, through some of these lighter areas. I think we can call this done. I am going to give you the close-up of everything. I love this doodle. I think it turned out pretty cool. We picked out some shapes and we have some nice sparkle on there too, and just some nice subtle patterns. So I hope you enjoyed this video today. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, keep creating.